Hey everybody, thank you for joining us once again on the Dancing Sober podcast. I want to give a big shout out to Espacio 1839. Come check out Espacio at 1839 East 1st Street out here in Boa Heights. This is a store where you can buy books, buy shirts, buy sweaters, and buy a lot of little cultural items. So please come check them out or find them online at espacio1839.com. Thank you guys so much. Let's just get to the podcast. This week's guest is Alfonso Gonzalez Jr. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dancing Sober podcast. And today we have in the studio Alfonso Gonzalez Jr. What's up, my brother?
Chilling. Good to be here.
You always go by Junior. You always have the Junior in there. It's like a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so.
Because I was just thinking about that, how like Junior is, of course, because of your father's name, and you also like took a lot of inspiration from your father and your father's work. So it's always like your father's a big presence in all of your.
Yeah, he is an artist, sign painter, and growing up, a lot of people called me Junior and stuff. So yeah,
El JR.
Yeah.
I know that you've watched a few of these episodes, so like we do in most of these shows, it's like we like to go back and like, where did young Alfonso grow up and where were you born, and tell us some stories of the origins.
Yeah. I was born in East LA, this small hospital off Olympic, and raised in Avocado Heights, La Puente, City of Industry, and San Gabriel Valley, and like lived in Hacienda Heights also. But, a lot of my family was on the east side when my mom's from this small ranch near Benjamo in Guanajuato. And my dad was raised in Tijuana, born in San Diego. And a lot of my family moved to Boyle Heights, East LA. My dad grew up in City Terrace, so this was like a really familiar area for me. And but when I was right before I was born, they moved to La Puente, so I was raised there. But it would always sort of frequent.
LA's in your DNA.
Yeah, so like after school would come to my grandma's house or aunts and uncles in East LA. So. And that's where I live now, East LA, and lived in Boyle Heights and stuff like that. But, the San Gabriel Valley is like really an important place to me and my history as well. So, yeah, all of that. It's like, all that side of. So
because your dad's also a sign painter and all that, I'm kind of interested in like how he started in sign painting.
Yeah, I think from what I know, he used to work at Sears, like the Sears Tower off Soto.
Yeah.
And was working there and sort of like, he was always interested in art and, like kind of came up during the Chicano art movement in the 70s and, probably saw it like even before that, but, was always interested in like mural painting and like the Mexican muralists and stuff like that. But he was working at Sears in the warehouse and was always like doodling on boxes from what I heard. And there was another dude that worked there who I believe attended LA Trade Tech. LA Trade Tech has this really old sign painting program, and the dude, his coworker, told him about the program, so he went there and began painting signs. This must have been, I think this was like in the early 80s, and then began painting signs and making a living as a sign painter. So I was, since I was born, was always exposed to art, but I also like that sort of like.
That's one of the biggest sign painting programs, like in LA, right? That Trade Tech.
The world, really. I mean,
really?
I think it's like one of the oldest in the world.
Wow.
I think.
I was just gonna say I don't know anybody who is a sign painter that didn't go there.
Yeah, especially in LA. I mean, it's such a LA Trade Tech's such a great school. It's a community college trade school. That it's like really accessible, like for me, I was like a horrible student, but you didn't really need any sort of credentials to like be able to go there. It's like they offer so many great sort of practical trades and plumbing, welding, fashion. They're like really amazing.
Well, let's go back.
Prolific people have gone there.
Let's go back to like you being young and growing up around your dad, and like did you go to work with him kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, it was like kind of like a
pick it up at home.
Yeah, it was like since I don't know. I remember like first grade probably is the first time I got suspended for like fighting or something, and every year after that would always get in trouble. So like I would always get sent home or suspended, and like
this is in La Puente.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. Well, just like nothing major, but just like little kid shit, But yeah, I would have to go to work with him, and I like wouldn't really like it. It'd be more of like, it wasn't like he was like, this is how you do this is how you do that. It was more of like, pick up the trash or like, all that sort of stuff. Exactly. So it's like it wasn't ever like this is how you do this particular thing. It's more of like just by watching, like visually, sort of just like seeing. And I wouldn't even particularly say I was super interested in entering that, but after high school, that was just like a very practical way of me being able to, well, first of all, I guess, go to school to learn something to go to work. I wanted to go to art school, but that didn't seem possible with my grades and financially. So,
where'd you go to high school?
In Hacienda Heights. Yeah.
What was the school's name?
Los Altos.
Los Altos, yeah.
Yeah.
So you were just not like into it.
No, not at all. Yeah. It was really just not at all.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to figure out like how and when did like, I know that your dad was around and he was painting and you could pick up like paintbrushes and stuff anytime, but how and when did that like become like an actual part of your life where you were like, oh, this is...
I mean, like always, really. I think never really into sports, and just kind of always interested in drawing, and like even early on being, some of my first memories are, I guess, like observing, whether it's murals, graffiti, or like things like that, and then like skateboard graphics, album covers, but also just enjoying the process and act of drawing. And I wasn't even really like a good drawer, like there's kids who could draw like perfect portraits and things. I always I never had that, but I always like had like this like creative side that the only thing I was ever like kind of did decent in was like when presentations of like the putting like a poster board together type of thing. But yeah, I think like even like really sort of like early on observing graffiti and then sort of like getting into that world a little bit, or getting into that stuff and doing that at an early age, and then after years later painting signs and sort of having some sort of art practice. I had like had like an art class in high school, and I did that was like, I had the opportunity to take AP art, which was like advanced placement art, which was the only advanced placement.
The only AP for you.
Or even like in I think like, elementary school, I remember being put in like a GATE program, gifted and whatever.
Gifted and talented.
That thing where it's like, they took me to another class to make art or draw. This is really, really early. But like, I never was like, I guess good at too many things, but that was the only thing that I felt like naturally like drawn towards. So
it was like your zone, right?
Yeah.
What's like really interesting to me and what I'm trying to get at is like, I mean, like your father did this as a business, but I guess he was an artist too, like not that sign painting is not an art, but he wasn't seeing it as like, an artist career, the sign painter. And how do you know when that like turned into you like, oh shit, this is like an art career, I'm a painter? Was there a time when it crossed over? This is what I'm trying to like.
You're saying when I went from commercial painter to an artist?
Yeah, when you realize like, yo, I'm an artist, this is like.
I think it was always like a thing. I mean, like I remember, it's like always like a thing that was there, whether I understood what. I mean, art is such a huge thing with like a huge world, and it's like the art world, but even the art world is such a huge thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, like I said, like just like naturally being drawn towards like skateboard graphics or like all these things. Like I always sort of like saw myself as an artist. And as you get older, I guess you realize like what is doable and what's not and what's practical. And like that's kind of like what led me to do the commercial painting. Yeah. But even while doing that, I sort of like saw myself as an artist until like, years down the line after working with, I mean, I guess I'm jumping all over the place, but like, I began working with companies that paint large outdoor advertisements here in LA, like as a low-level apprentice who basically like would paint walls wide and carry really heavy things up on rooftops. So like these companies that paint hand-painted billboards, like you see it off the freeway, or like in Hollywood or downtown, like say like
the major like painted billboards. Yeah,
like Olympic and Figueroa, like near Staples Center has a lot of them, or Hollywood. Or I began working with companies doing that, and I didn't even know how to paint. Like,
how old were you at this time?
I was like 23.
And you had already gone to
trade tech. That's how I kind of like one of my friends that I went to school with began working with this company, and then I was living in San Francisco for a little bit, just kind of fucking around and working shitty jobs and trying to make a living. And it was, but during that time, my friend hit me up and said, hey, there's extra work. They were painting these, you've probably seen like these Tattoo Expo billboards. They're like Tattoo Expo, and they're like usually fluorescent, and they're on the freeway. You'll probably notice them if you pay attention. Of like, so basically there's like these fluorescent billboards that, so back in the day, everything was hand painted. Back in the day, every ad was hand painted pre computers and digital printing. And then eventually through digital printing, that went, digital printing was cheaper, so it doesn't make sense to hand paint things. But there was still an industry that was kept alive through loopholes of, you can't advertise in certain zoning areas, but there's like certain areas, say near Staples Center or off the freeway or in Hollywood, that are like prime real estate, prime like advertisement real estate, but through loopholes, they were able to
paint a mural.
So it's not an advertisement if it has limited text. So like that industry sort of still stayed alive through that. And that's how these companies in LA and New York and a few major cities were able to sort of stay afloat. And it's like there was still like a handful of old billboard painters that stayed in that industry, but they transferred to painting walls. So basically what I was saying is like they had a bunch of billboards to paint, and the reason that these billboards were painted was because it was fluorescent, and you can't print fluorescent. So they would hire this company that I started working with to paint these billboards, and I went in and they said, okay, this is what we need to do. And I already knew how to do everything. And they're like, oh shit, we didn't really have to teach you much, because it's basic lettering and I could do big letters and all that sort of stuff. And they're like, okay, well, if you move back to LA, we'll get you a job. And I said, okay. Like I moved back to LA and began working with this company. And then through that company, they also painted walls and then began, getting really not getting paid much, close to minimum wage. But I was like, this is like amazing. Like, this is what I've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
So it's like I saw that was like a way of learning how to, well, first of all, I knew I couldn't work like any sort of office job. I knew I worked like at a sandwich shop and I kept getting demoted. I worked at the San Francisco Zoo, like one of those annoying people who takes your photo when you walk in.
No,
like if you go to Six Flags, they're like, let me get your photo. And then
none of these jobs are horrible jobs, but I just can't imagine you doing them.
I did them, but I literally got demoted on all of them, like because I was just like I
can imagine you weren't into it, and it was
definitely not into it.
It was visible to them.
Yeah. So and everybody was like, I remember people being, man, that guy's an idiot, and so it's like doesn't feel really good, but anyway, like so when I got the opportunity to do that other work, I was like, yeah, for sure, like let's do it, and then I began like being around these really amazing painters who could basically reproduce any image, and then sort of like I never really made work like that or thought about it. I never thought I could. I never thought I never thought that like someone would pay me to do that kind of work. It was super labor intensive. Like, you know, it's like all day in the sun and the rain and just like, you know, 12-hour days.
You guys would paint in the rain?
Yeah.
Wow.
And then eventually I worked for companies based out of New York, and we work in the snow.
Wow.
I travel around the country, just like no days off, working 13, 14-hour days, just really, really intense. But I think like that kind of work, well, I think I like a little bit of intense, crazy environments
Part of the draw.
crazy people. Like my coworkers were like, some of the people I worked with were like older, pretty much all men, and like older, very vulgar, tough, just like they would be like, you know, yelling at me like, you fucking idiot, grab this, grab that. So you had to have thick skin, you know, and I kind of like grew up in sort of an environment that was like that anyway. So I just knew like, okay, this is a great opportunity. I don't, you know, like I need to work. I knew what it was to go broke. So I'm like, I don't want to go broke. But it also really taught a lot as far as like how to start and finish something, how to, you know, there's no giving up or going home. It's like, no, you need to stay here. And if you hit a wall, you got to figure out how to get around it. So a lot of really very valuable things to learn, you know.
How many years were you with that company?
That company, maybe 5 years. And then eventually I started working with another company based out of New York, which was a great experience because it got me out of LA, exposed me to, I mean, people in New York's like just an intense place to work. Just like even just going to work in Manhattan, you know, and like trying to find parking, and then plus setting up a ladder on a busy street and then hauling like a bunch of 5-gallon buckets up on a roof without spilling it. You know, just like all these, you know, like very intense like things. Like in New York, if you say you're going to be there at 7, you better be there like 30 minutes before, you know, like it's like you can't be late. There's no slacking. There's no fucking off. It's like very intense, but it's also like different types of people. So, you know, like people from all over the world and all kinds of different people that I wasn't really used to being around and also like working with. So, and then that company had work all over the country. So I was like traveling the United States, like pretty much every major city in the United States, like working with different crews or like leading crews sometimes, and sometimes doing jobs by myself, like go to, I don't know, Oregon and paint this ad by yourself and figure it out, like go rent the equipment, and I don't know, just like different things like that, you know.
So before doing all that, were you doing this with your dad? Were you sign painting in LA with your dad? Or
Not
did you ever work
really.
with him?
I did, but not consistently, not really. Maybe it was like, I did, yes, but it wasn't like a normal, I think he had like work for himself, and if he needed a hand, maybe I'll go. But at the same time, it's like, it wasn't like I couldn't live off of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There wasn't enough work for like me to be able to.
So then I'm trying to get an idea of like before you went to I guess Trade Tech, what was your art outlet?
Graffiti. I also played music, made music for years, and made music and painted graffiti and that sort of like world.
Were you in a band with another artist that I'm thinking of?
I don't think so.
Were you? What did you play?
I played drums.
Okay. Yeah. What kind of music?
Early on, I mean, I started when I was like 12 or something. So like early on, I was very into punk.
So you're always like a little artist boy, like always.
Yeah, just like
creative.
But even like that world of, I played all kinds of music basically, and we never really like played covers. I made music with like a few other really like great musicians who we came up together and always kind of like wanted to make our own music, and we sort of didn't really want to stick to a genre and like, but yeah, even like making like doing like music, whether it's like in like, throwing like backyard shows, it kind of like taught me like you could just do things on your own. Like you don't need like a venue, you know, you could just like, if you have a backyard, or if you just have as long as like you could set up, you could make something happen. It's like that very DIY thing. And same with like a lot of friends, you know, like being involved in graffiti, like also interested in like hip hop, and during that time, like a lot of like underground hip hop sort of things that, there's no financial support. It's just kind of like these kids or these people who are just down to do it, and you just make it happen. And it's like there's no nothing. It's just you and the thing that you're interested in.
Did you used to do graffiti pieces, like big pieces? Or?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like that is also like a very.
What did you used to write?
I prefer not to talk about that, but I think like that sort of world is like very like another big confidence builder, because it's like something that you see, especially like when I kind of was, I started like as a really young kid, and not knowing anybody who did it, and then slowly it's like one of the like pre-internet basically.
Yeah.
Which, you remember, like
course, yeah.
That's obviously. But
I was writing on walls in '89, like putting up pieces and
that was the year I was born.
Yeah.
So, but it's like a thing that's like underground, and you kind of like, it's all like word of mouth, and then they, it's like, how do you do this? How do you do that? Where do you get your tips? There wasn't like graph shops. I mean, there's like off Melrose or something, but I'm not gonna like, I didn't go out there. Eventually at the Montebello Mall, there was like a graph shop, or they had streaks and tips, but really like it wasn't like what it is now, you know what I mean? And it's like kind of like that sort of thing really teaches you like how to figure it out and just like sort of make it happen. And also like that confidence of like really sucking at something, and then like eventually through time and like through you being passionate about it, you could figure out like how to achieve, whether it's getting a spot, and like same with skateboarding, like finding a spot and like being persistent and sort of like just like figuring it out,
Yeah. So how did all of this now, I mean, I'm trying not to move too fast to like where you're at now, but when did you start to do art that would then eventually show in galleries? Like when did you start? How did that connection start?
I guess like, yeah, like I said, I've always made art, but like I mentioned, I was working for a company that was based out of New York. So I'd spend a lot of time in New York or like other parts of the country, which meant that I basically was never here in LA. And after years of painting signs and advertisement and basically making work for other people that other people dictated, I kind of got really tired of it and was like, shit, like I just like what, like even having conversations with people are like, oh, let me see your work. And I'm like, shit, I haven't really made anything in the past few years. Or I don't want to show you this stupid ad that I really don't care about. Like, just kind of getting frustrated at that. And then also just like working in New York or other major cities and sort of like visiting museums. And then like, I've always like peripherally known about like artists and contemporary art, and like knew like the main big people that most people know, but didn't really ever dive deep. I knew like the people through like, I knew like people like graffiti, skateboard, or like Chicano artists, like people like kind of like closer to like my background. I knew like their art, but I didn't really know like the contemporary like artists that you read in art history. Then I kind of started looking at that sort of stuff, and then sort of like going to like major museums in New York and sort of like started looking at it and really sort of like kind of learning about that sort of thing. And then just being like sort of making, we all interpret art in our own way, and we all sort of like filter it through our life experiences, and I sort of like started going to like the museum's permanent collection and started looking at like, say, like pop artists or abstract expressionists and all these different movements throughout like recent history, and sort of started like relating it to my my experience, like seeing like a Rothko with like thinking about like a big buff mark, or like, a lot of pop art is basically like very similar to like what I know. I was painting signs, I was painting like big bottles and cans, and it's like, oh shit, like damn, like, and started thinking like, damn, that kind of reminds me of this thing I've seen, or this sort of reminds me of this thing that's very similar. But when I read about it, it wasn't that at all. It was like something completely different. So it gave me the idea of like, I want to make work. Like I was thinking like there is no work. Well, I wasn't seeing the work that like really related to me, and I was like, oh, that'd be sick if this person did it this way, or like, I like this, but I don't like this part. So then I'm like, shit, like I'm just gonna do it,
Yeah.
But since I was working I never really had days off and had very few, didn't really have, I guess, time to make my own work. When I would come back home, it'd be like, you got to handle other business or just rest or see family or things like that. And then, eventually I was just like, man, like, I was always just like most people, like, who come, like, working class people, it's like, you don't really, like, who has the luxury of being able to sit for hours and make art? It's like, like, that's why the art world is really like, throughout history, it's like a certain type of person who has that privilege and that luxury of time and sort of like, or is able to go to school or do these sort of things. And I was just kind of like, I got to make a living. But, and I was always just like stressed because there was moments where it was like, damn, like, I need to pay rent, or I need to do very practical shit. I need to survive. But, I got to a point where I'm like, man, like, I'm so like over this shit that I'm just going to like quit my job and just try to make art and try to figure it out. Because I tried to do that before. Yeah. Like, I definitely, there was another moment where I'm like, man, fuck this. And I quit. And then I was like, ooh, I didn't have the discipline or the understanding or these very, like, you can't just like jump without, like, you need something to like, and I didn't really necessarily, like, I've quit my job to try to make art and do things like my early 20s. And
without savings,
I wasn't able to, I had no savings. I didn't have anything. It was just like, all right, I'm going to try to figure it out. And then it was like, nope. And that's like, I moved back to LA, and then it was like, but by the time I was like quit the second time in my maybe late to mid 20s, late 20s, it was like I at least had through, close to like maybe 8 years or 10 years of really working and figuring out this like thing that I was able to quit and then start doing other kind of work that was like not every day. It was like in LA, and I could work. I eventually started working with my friend's company that does the same kind of things. But
I can imagine that at one point you probably could have made the decision to like start your own sign painting company and make lots of money doing that.
Yeah.
But still, like, the art
world
pulled you.
That was the thing. I was like, okay, do I quit and make my own, start my own company and sort of try to like build that and scale that? And, but my intuition was like, nah, like, that's not the right thing. Like, you were always kind of like worried about money and like making a living, and which is very real, right? But I knew that if like, as long as I had enough to get by, I would be way happier than if I was like trying to like manage this other thing. And like, I just knew, cause I just knew that wasn't the thing. And something just kind of was like, nah, you got to just try to do this other thing. And that's a very intimidating place to be, especially for, once I started researching like who are these people? Like, how do they do it? And I'm like, oh, like, you mean all you guys have master's degrees, MFAs? And I'm like, shit, like, I'm starting from scratch. Like, But
you had the skill.
Yeah, but a lot of people have skill.
Yeah.
A lot of people have skill. Like, it's very, like, I've grown up, all my life I've seen people who are a million times more talented than me. There's so many people with skill. That's an important part, but that's not the only thing.
No.
I don't know what it is, but like, it's like all these different things that sort of like, but I knew like,
yeah, it's a trip.
It's like
all the different layers that have to like link up at the right time for it to happen. Cause I mean, there was younger times when you were younger, like, do it, it didn't work, do it, it didn't work. But then at one point it just did. And this is what I'm trying to like figure out, understand about you and your life, is how that happened. Because you do have like a completely different route than 95% of the artists out there. And that's like part of what's really interesting about your career, right?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of like maybe failure and insecurity, like these things that like maybe you wouldn't associate with like what it takes to get to a place where I guess I'm able to now every day make art, and like that's kind of like the thing that I do. But I think, man, it's hard to say. It's like all these things. It's like things that are out of my control too. I think it's like a lot of hard work, not giving up, but it's also time and place, you know, like sometimes like things just line up so that it could work out, you know. And I also think that like on a very practical way or level, it was kind of always like, okay, I already understand the idea of like me taking my time to like paint as an exchange to like make a living, you know. And like when I started like my art practice, it was never, I told myself, don't ever let, and I still have to always tell myself, like remind myself, like don't ever let the financial aspects dictate anything of what I'm doing in the studio or like through my practice. Like never. Like the moment you start doing that, it's like it's for someone else, you know. And I think the best work is like very like people feel that, you know, the authenticity or like you forcing something. And so like I never thought that people would. I just was like, okay, I want to make work that I'm happy with, that I want to see, that makes me feel good about.
That's part of what took you out of the other world where you were painting.
Because if
it
was about
do that anymore.
Yeah, I would have started like there was the moment where I'm like, do I start a sign company, or do I become a broke artist? And I'm like, well, what do I even need, or what do I even do? Like I was broke anyway. Like I was working my ass off every day, like harder than anyone I knew. Like I had homies with the chillest jobs making more money than me, and I'm like, hey, I could do that job, but there's all these other on paper, on paper, no one would hire me. Like if you look at my, like me on paper, you know, like with all the things that people look at to hire people, like no, like never. Yeah. But I knew that I had something else, which I've always known that, but I've obviously quit. I've like failed, so it's like hard to like continue to push. But you know, like through these other things, everything I've ever done in my life, like nobody, like I never made music for money. I never made art or painted graffiti. If anything, like that sort of stuff, I lost a lot of like I had I went out of my way to pay to do that. You know what I mean? It's like a negative.
Yeah.
So, but I just knew that like the moment, like when I started making work for myself again, I just was like happy and it felt right. And I'm like, this is like the feeling that I'm trying to get.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's a really good point. Sometimes, you know, people are like, they see you as an artist continually like doing and showing stuff in the beginning, but you're barely like making enough money to produce the art or to even be out there and like, you know, buy the equipment that you need to continue to do your art. And then some of us, or some people get really lucky where they can actually make a real living out of, you know, doing that art. And some people stay with just struggling to even like make an art piece happen because there's, you know, the money's not there for it for some reason. So it sucks that money is a big part of all that. But that's the world that we live in.
I think there's like a moment where, I guess we all make a decision of like what our ideal life is, you know, and I guess like what makes us happy. And it's not always like going to be easy, but I think a lot of artists need to just really follow what feels right to like live, you know, like what kind of life do you want to live? And we're like the only ones who could really dictate that. Like my idea of like happiness is different from someone else's, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
And like, if you're always chasing like a perfect job or a perfect situation, like I don't know if that ever really comes, but it's like something we all got to constantly remind ourselves, right? Because you get caught up on these different things. But yeah,
I mean, for me, what happened is like I decided that I never wanted to work for anybody else. I just didn't want to work for anybody else anymore. And I had jobs the same where I was like, I was making decent money, I was making good money, but I was still always like chasing, like, you know, still living check by check. Like It didn't really matter if I was making a lot of money or a little money, I was still living the same way. Maybe that's just poor money management on my part, but I didn't know how to do it. And then one day I just decided to do whatever I wanted to. I just followed my gut and started working in this direction. Still a struggle every day, but you have this peace of mind that nothing can buy. Like it's just like this is now like your life. It's just different when you're making your own shit that you're like bringing into the world, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like you said, I mean, through all that of me trying to like live like a stable life, because I guess it's because of other moments where it didn't feel stable. Then I was like trying to like, all right, for sure, I need to make sure that I have X amount to pay rent or whatever it is. Then you're always kind of like chasing this thing, but then at the end of the day, looking back, I'm like, damn, it didn't even really make a difference. So like, it's great to now just have that piece of like, really, like, we don't like, what do we need? Like, we don't need like much to live a happy, chill life, like.
At what time did like you go from like, when did you actually start showing at galleries, and when did you realize that the art world was looking at you? Because that's another thing that's really interesting too, is like you were saying, a lot of things have to like fall into place. And I think it's just like the right, perfect time for an artist like yourself to like be out there. And it just seemed to be like, whoosh, let's go.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that really helped me was sort of like my background of, like I said, like the DIY stuff. So some of my first opportunities to show art were things that I organized myself.
Same. Things
that I didn't wait for like the curator or the gallery to be like, okay, now's your time. It was like, all right, we got access to this small space, or you'll let me clear out this area of this building or set up on this dead end street. Like, let's make it happen. Like, all right, I know no one knows who the fuck I am, but let's organize a group show with like homies, just friends. Like, it's not even like people who have, just friends. Like, we all like are around so many great people, and a lot of people don't even think about showing work because maybe they're, I don't know, like, where do you even start, right? Like, getting started is very difficult in anything. But I think, like, gratefully through my, like I said, my past experiences, I was like, one of the first things is like I organized a group show at a space. It was like a studio space. Actually, it's like Tlaloc Studios now, but this was pre-Tlaloc. I knew some people who had studio there, and there's like a small exhibition space, and I organized like a group show. And then other people saw that, and maybe I had like a work in there, and then they were like, oh, I'm doing this little group show. It's not like a real gallery show or anything, but they're like, hey, throw something in this. And I'm like, fuck yeah. Like, just anywhere I could show work, as long as people see it, like, not even thinking about selling it, just like, I just want to be able to show work. Like, so yeah, just like little by little, like showing another work here, showing another work there. And then eventually, like, I make a work and like, oh, like, how much is that? I want to buy it. I'm like, oh shit. Like, it's like one of those things I don't even remember, but it's like, man, like, give me $20, like, I don't know. Like, I don't remember, but like $200, like anything, like, that's like, the idea of someone paying for it, like, dude, I pay myself to do this, you know what I mean? Like, like, so yeah, just by doing it through that way, and then little by little the ball like starts rolling, and then there's so many, like, I mean, gratefully I have the privilege of being in LA, where there's so many artist run spaces, there's so much things happening, there's such a rich like community here, and so many different little pockets, on all levels of art.
So was it do you know of a, I mean, can you imagine like a particular show where maybe somebody gave you a review that you were like, oh shit, like the art world is looking at me, not just my homies anymore?
Maybe that's like more recently.
Yeah.
And like the world is not, of course the art world is like a very weird, tricky place, and really full of shit a lot of the times, but it's just like, it's funny when like one person like stamps it or like says, "Oh, this is cool," then like other people think it's cool. You know, like it's interesting how like sometimes other people. It's weird, and I think like most of like everything's a little bit of that. I think about it's like, oh, you went to Yale, okay, cool. Oh, this person bought your work, okay, cool.
We'll stamp it,
You're important, and but you know, like I think artists see it like amongst themselves. Like there's a lot of artists I look at who don't show work, and I'm like, damn, like I'm doing this like little group show. I have this access to this space, like. You should throw work in, and they don't really show work, but their work is like just amazing, like just like so great, but maybe they don't have that confidence because they haven't had the opportunity. But yeah, I guess as far as like the larger art world outside of my community, that's maybe been fairly recent.
Yeah. I went to your show at Matthew Brown LA. And that, I had seen your work. I had seen your work at your house. I had seen a couple pieces here and there. But when I went to that show, like, I mean, you took it like 5 notches up, like 5 levels. I don't know if it was because of the size of it or what, but I walked out of there just like, wow. Like, this guy really elevated his art. Like, and it wasn't... You didn't do anything different. Maybe it was the scale. Maybe it was being able to see so much work in one place. But how did you end up at Matthew Brown? Or you know,
well, that happened pretty organically. I think just meeting Matthew through mutual friends, or actually, I went to Vincent Valdez's show. Who shows with him? Amazing artist, and. Just met him and then saw him around. And then, it was like, let's do a studio visit. But yeah, that was my first ever solo show. And I'm really grateful to have had my solo show, or even sort of like, I guess some people find out about my work now, or even get started now, you know, because like I said, I've always made art, but I think a big part of me is like really grateful that I didn't go to art school straight after high school, because I think you need some sort of life experience to have something to say, you know, and all these like ups and downs and failures and just, I don't know, just life, it really teaches you a lot. And like, I think that was a good moment for me as far as like going back to like, sometimes things just have to align, where I kind of just like thought about, like I was able to take something serious and also have the time and support to like make a show like that happen. So yeah, like saying like that was my first ever solo show. And I kind of just approached it in a way of like, okay, this is like my introduction to sort of like the larger art world in LA. It was during like Freeze, so there was a lot of like international people in town, and I just knew that like I feel like kind of the way I thought about it. Maybe I was like overthinking it or something, but I'm like, this is my first impression, and I want like it to be somewhat memorable. So I want to just do the best I can, really. Like I know, like I've always kind of like, I think the thing that I'm not like the most talented or smart or this or that, but I'm down to work. I'm down to work hard and put in effort and
well, art is so weird that you don't have to be anything, you know. Like, I mean, you are obviously very talented, but it's a beautiful place where like really anybody can like do anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I mean for sure. I mean, we always hear if I could do it, you can. But honestly, like for real, like I just really put in my effort and really thought about it, and did the best I could with what I had. And gratefully, I had more support than I ever had, and more understanding, and just like an idea, like I had been sort of like making work in this chapter and period of my life for enough time for me to be able to like have something to say and put together like a show that I feel like was a good representation of where I'm at or where I was at that time.
And not just where you were at that time, but also like showing like what you've lived. Like it showed a lot of, I mean, from what I saw, like it showed a lot of what you have experienced, your life experience in, you know, communities like ours.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm also somebody that didn't get to go to art school, and because I mean I didn't even think about it until I was like 40 or later. But how do you deal with like those moments where you're like, damn, I wish I understood this. I wish I understood that, because I get stuck in moments like that. I get stuck in places like that. I like we were talking about earlier. I get stuck on panels where I'm surrounded by MFAs and it's intimidating for us like that don't have that degree.
Yeah.
How do you get past that, or how do you handle these moments?
I ask questions. I mean, like early on, before I was really around, like while I was still doing commercial painting, when I'm like, damn, I want to like have my own art practice, which I didn't even know what that meant, you know. But I just went on YouTube and really simple, like how to show in a gallery, or like what's the difference between a gallery and a museum. You know, like I didn't know shit. Like I remember I went to the MoMA in New York, and I had a pass for the MoCA in LA, like a little pass, like a little card, like, oh, free entrance. So I went there to the MoMA, and I'm like, oh, here, like, they like looked at me like, this is for the MoCA. Like, what the fuck? I thought like all museums were connected, you know? So I didn't know shit.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, but I didn't know anything. So like I just kind of just like now we have access to like so much information and podcast and just like everything, right? So like I guess like first searching online and then asking friends, you know, like there wasn't that many people I knew who had like a serious art practice. Like I knew a lot of artists, but not a lot of people who had like were really pushing it, or maybe showing in galleries, or maybe had a studio. I mean, like Michael Alvarez is like a friend that we kind of grew up like somewhat similar areas, San Gabriel Valley, East LA, and like you know, grew up doing graffiti and skateboarding and had like a lot of mutual friends. And he's like one of the first people in LA that I saw who had like a studio. You know, I remember going on lunch break when I was still working for the first company I worked for in LA and in Koreatown, and we worked on Wilshire and Western painting this really huge wall. And during lunch breaks, me and my friend, who also grew up with him, we would go, he grew up in like El Sereno, Alhambra area. We would go like visit his studio and just be like, fuck, like we're out there like fucking hanging off the side of a building in this hot sun, and you're over here chilling, making your sick ass paintings.
Yeah.
But you know, just like asking questions, like
I didn't know you guys knew each other since way back.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
that's
not
cool,
like
yeah.
little kids, but you know, like before I even thought about making art. But I like everybody always knew like, oh, Michael's pushing it, and there's like a handful of other people, you know, but like he's like one of the first people and like still like a big inspiration. But like, yeah, just like asking like, oh shit, like how do you do that, or how do you do this, and then eventually like meeting other people, and then meeting other people, and it's just kind of like, you know, it's not like really like, I guess some people maybe eventually I hit up online, maybe a handful of people, not really, but it was just like meeting people like organically.
Yeah.
And then like asking questions like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And then eventually you meet a curator and, oh, so how do you do this? How do you do that? And then eventually you meet like a gallerist art dealer and like, oh, how do you do this? How do you, like really honestly, and then just like listening to like audiobooks and like all that shit. Like I feel like I overcompensated since I didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Like I felt like, damn, like I knew all these other people who are like were going to UCLA, and not a bunch, but like maybe a handful of people who were doing it already, and I'm like, damn, like I'm such a schmuck, I don't know anything. So like let me like really go out of my way to learn, and then like eventually I realized like, oh damn, like I probably researched some of this stuff more than the people who have MFAs, and but then again, like on a very practical level, since I did come at it through a commercial art background, it's like I guess I had an understanding of how to,
The production side of it.
yeah, the production and how to work with other people and
Yeah.
sort of like even like production costs and how to like little things
Yeah. Yeah.
like that.
You had a lot of experience already.
Yeah.
In that whole aspect of making work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like, I guess when you enter into the art world, you have to frame everything different. And
You do it.
I don't just mean physical framing. But
No, you do. It's like very intimidating, you know. It's like basically like what the art world a lot of the times does is sort of like create this wall where it's like, you know, you're not smart enough or you're not part of this thing or you're not part of this class. You know, you read the wall text and you're like, I don't know what the fuck I just read. Like
yeah, you got to speak the language.
I zoned out at the beginning of the sentence. I don't speak this language. This isn't for me. You know, everybody's kind of, not everybody, hopefully it's changing, but a lot of the times it's very cold and not welcoming in a lot of ways. But, you know, it's also like intimidating in a lot of ways, but then it's also like, damn, like I've dealt with other intimidating situations in my life where I'm like way more afraid of, intimidated by other shit that's happened in life that I'm not like tripping if you don't fuck with me. You know?
I mean, some art writing is like ridiculous, but some of it is amazing.
Of course. No, and I'm not talking down on everything and everyone. I mean, I think.
No, I'm just giving credit to like those times when, because I've been like at shows where I'm like, oh, this guy's just full of shit, and then you go to another and you're like, wow, like this person is crafting their sentences and their artist statements in a way that completely makes sense with all of their artwork, and it's understandable to human beings that are out here at the show too, you know, not just.
Of course. And it makes you appreciate the work sometimes more than you would if you didn't read the thing.
Yeah. What a trip to me, like figuring out right now that like you and Michael knew each other before, like you were even doing your art practice. I love that story so much. And what a trip that now, like you guys just came back from Spain from, you know, having shows out there. And who else was out there? You, Elmer, Raul, Michael.
Yeah, a handful of us. It's like a handful of LA artists, Jaime.
Jaime Munoz is out there too.
Yeah. Good. I don't want to like start listing people because I don't want to forget. But yeah, no, it's super sick to have the opportunity to show work in other countries, and gratefully I've been able to do that. And also like, let's go. You know, like earlier this year I was in Hong Kong for like another big group show, and I'm planning possibly some other things, but it's crazy. I don't know.
Yeah. It's crazy how young your career is, right? So you have a very young career, but you've already like gotten these opportunities to show in like major galleries and travel the world doing all that stuff. What do you like? How do you feel about this? Like right now at this moment, do you feel like I don't know, how are you accepting all of this like, you know, attention right now?
Well, I mean, damn, it's a attention. I really, it was even hard for me to do this podcast because I feel like, I don't know, like I want people to see my work.
Yeah.
I want like as many people to see my work, but I feel like me and my face and my voice, I've always kind of like, it's been like even me having photos of myself online was like a weird thing. And maybe because like of my background and maybe like other things that I did where I'm like, I want to stay anonymous, you know? I don't really like attention particularly, but I think I'm definitely grateful for the opportunities and really just kind of like, I don't know, like it's definitely a young career as far as like kind of where I'm at right now, but it's like, you know, years in the making, you know, years and years of just like observing and all these different other experiences that led to where I'm at now. And it's really just kind of like, I don't know, I heard someone say, you know, like these corny lines that you hear that really actually hit that are like super real sometimes. It's like you're rewarded in public for what you do in private, you know? And it's like for years of just like doing things that no one would ever see or just like doing things for myself. And then eventually, like, I guess somehow like things align that I guess yeah, there's like interest and stuff. But you know, it's a weird moment in art in the world, and you know, like yeah, it's like funny that like people are like, wow, like look at all this new interesting things going on in LA, and it's like, dude, there's been mad amazing things here forever. It's like it's just that for some reason, I guess like the elite art world didn't view it as this like important, which is bullshit, you know. I mean, like there's so many artists that I'm inspired by that I think are like a million times better and more important and all these things than me, you know. Like just even in this area, East LA, Boyle Heights, if you look at like there's a lot of like artists still practicing, still have really important studio practice. But I think like it's funny how I guess it's not only the art world. I guess you could see it in music. You could see it in different things where people are always trying to find something new. Like, what's the new thing, you know? And it's like, I guess I just happened to come along during that time. But I also just definitely tried to, like, not... If there ever is, like, someone saying things like that, like, oh, you're doing so good, it's like... There's ups and downs. Like, there's... Like, life has its ups and downs, and you know, you can't always expect to stay in this, like, everything, like, things change fast, and I'm just grateful to be able to do it now, and hopefully, like, my plan is to do this for the rest of my life, so it's, like, not get wrapped up in any of the hype stuff, and just kind of, like, stay, like, yeah, just be able to do this.
I want to ask, like, because obviously, like, being a sign painter at the level that you're at, you could paint anything. Could paint anything, I imagine. And how is it that, or what made you come to painting what you do paint, which is, you know, like the things in our neighborhood are just like kind of like still lives or like landscapes and different little, you know, tidbits of the neighborhood.
Yeah, so kind of like, I guess what I slightly mentioned earlier, which was going to museums and kind of like feeling like, oh, that reminds me of this thing, or that reminds me of that thing, or I would do it this way or that way. But also kind of like, once I started researching LA art, you know, like I mentioned, there's a lot of very inspiring artists like the Chicano art movement, and, you know, but when I started researching like what's in the history books, if you look at LA art, it's like a very white, Hollywood, West LA, you know, like you see like the David Hockney pools, or like Ed Ruscha's like sort of like, you know, Hollywood, like sunset, you know, and it's like, that's not what I know, you know, like when I would hear people
you
talk.
Can't paint that,
Yeah, it's like when people talk about, I remember, you know, like we always hear people like, oh, LA people are so this way or that way. It's like, no, dude, like you just go to a certain part where it's a bunch of maybe transplants or a certain kind of person that maybe is like that, but that's not what I know. Like, I never went to Beverly Hills, like, up until, like, maybe recently a handful of times, you know? Never, like, did a lot of these things, went to certain parts of West LA, you know? So that didn't really relate to me. And I guess I was just kind of like, yeah, you know, like, even when I started making the work that I do, I remember kind of being hesitant and sort of like, I made all kinds of different work before I did what I'm doing now, because I thought it was too obvious, you know. It's like sign paint, like something that incorporates sign painting and sort of like referencing like these different landscapes. But the moment I'd sort of allowed myself to do that, like one important sort of like moment, a few different moments I had were just sort of allowing myself to make bad work, and just like, if I have an idea, just do it. I think that's something that a lot of people don't let themselves do, and especially like people who appreciate art. There's so many people who like love and appreciate art, but are super intimidated because they love and appreciate it so much. But it's like, hey, like the way I see it, it's like, hey, like if you know, go shoot some hoops, you're not trying to be in the NBA, just go have some fun, you know, like you're not like...
The process alone is good.
Yeah, it's intimidating for a lot of people, but sometimes you just got to do it and just let it out, you know, like you just got to, and yeah, you know, like and then I kind of made a work that was more similar to what I'm doing now, and I was like, wow, this feels really this feels right. And then I kind of just started thinking about like everything. I was like, I've always obsessively documented, you know, like I think photography is like a important part of my practice, although I don't really see myself as a photographer. It's kind of just like, you know, like early on with graffiti, like steal like a disposable camera and go document shit. I remember, yeah, really young, like documenting stuff in the LA River and just like that was just always really fun. But also, eventually, like cell phone photos, and then like Instagram, and I kind of had like a anonymous account of just like street photography for years.
Oh, shit.
And just kind of just like basically if like what I'm doing now, I've done it forever and always just sort of observed and looked, but it wasn't like under me or under my name. It was just something that I do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, but now it's like, there's just so much you could do with, or there's so many ideas I have and so much like I want to get out. Just kind of like thinking about like the community's like relationship to public space and how like we changed and influence the surface and how sort of like a city could feel the way it does. And it's like the people who do that. It's like, you know, the people who make that up. And my time working in New York or even like leaving LA for a little bit and coming back and seeing like the things that I really appreciate disappearing, you know, like I used to live over here, like in Boyle Heights, like off Wabash, and there was like this dope ass mural of Fickett, and it was like on this liquor store, and it was what's the homie's name? I think that Mictlan murals, that dude.
Raul, yeah.
Raul. He painted this mural, and then it got fucking just like these layers of graffiti, like the hood's like really like active right there, and it just looked beautiful, and I'm like, wow, I love that mural. Like I need to shoot that, but I've like lived so close to it that I never documented it, and then one day it was gone.
Damn.
And then I kept seeing
I
like,
know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, and I kept seeing murals disappear, and then I kept seeing buildings leave or signage or graffiti or these things, and then I started seeing like new development, and then I started seeing like the same type of building that I would see in Seattle is like the same building they're doing. And
The cookie cutters.
yeah, it's like, and then it's like, wow, like, you know, like nothing is permanent and everything's changing. And I'm very like used to that through like graffiti or even like the ads I would paint. It's like very temporary, you know, but it's also like, wow, like I really appreciated these things and I really love them. And it's like, they're kind of like disappearing little by little. And like, we live in such a unique, interesting time. And we see it with COVID. We see like the drastic changes. We see the businesses and the gentrification and the just like these things closing down. So like there was kind of like this sense of urgency to sort of like preserve that. And that's something that like I seen in what you do, you know, like I just like really want to give you your props. I saw your show at what is it?
La Plaza?
Yeah. I saw that show. I didn't really know you, but I saw it on somewhere online, and I'm like, oh, I got to see this. I kind of saw, and I went and I saw like the work you did, and it's like I still think about that show all the time. It's like one of the most impressive. No, honestly, I hear you. I listen to this. I watch or listen to your podcast, and you're always saying, I don't know about art or this or that. No, like that show and the work that you do is some of the most impressive
Thanks.
stuff I see. And it's like, you know, like things that I'm so familiar with, but it's like, I think you could really tell like a good artist where you could see something that's familiar, but it's like through a unique lens, you know, it's like what makes art good. It's like, you know, for hundreds of years, thousands of years, people have painted flowers or like faces, but if someone does it, they could still do that, but they do it in a unique way. Like that shit's dope. And when I saw your show,
Crazy, right?
I saw your show and I saw like you had those these crazy shots of like Whittier Boulevard from like this unique perspective, or like that video you did of driving through LA, and it's kind of like a time lapse, and I'm like, damn, like it's so simple but so brilliant. I'm just like, whoa, that shit's like very fucking sick.
Thanks, bro.
And this podcast is super important. It's like documenting like these amazing artists that maybe, I guess, like this like archive that you're building is like going to be, or is like nobody's doing this, but like for you to do it and really sort of like also like organically do it. It's not like you're like like we know each other, you know, like we've talked about it. It's like your homies, but also like amazing artists. And also, let me just, one more thing, that comedy show. You did that comedy, like I went to that comedy show you did. That shit was fire.
When I was producing comedy shows, I wasn't stand-up.
I know you weren't doing stand-up, but stand-up.
People sometimes think that I do stand-up, but no, I never.
I mean, you
did.
throw jokes out here.
Yeah, but I never did stand-up.
But that show was really sick because I love comedy. That's
Yeah.
like a thing that I like to do and go to comedy shows. But to go to a show in Boyle Heights and hear like these comedians do this like really great material, like that shit's dope.
Yeah. I forgot what I was going to say next.
Sorry.
No, that's cool. That's
Making
cool.
it about you now. So can you
appreciate
tell
it.
me? No, I'm just kidding.
I appreciate it. I mean, especially I gotta say that I appreciate your comments about the show at La Plaza, because that show was like, it was a difficult one to put together, and it's been a minute, so I haven't heard about it in a while, so I appreciate that a lot.
Got to do it more.
Yeah, I hope. I mean, I'm shooting a lot more right now, so I hope to show some more work in the future. But speaking of shows, and to wind down, like what do you have coming up in LA? Any shows coming up or?
Yeah, I'm working on a few different things. A few things, pretty much around the country. As far as LA, yeah, I guess pretty much everything right now is.
You're just international now.
I mean, I don't know.
I think I'm noticing that it's kind of like difficult for you to accept this, like a lot of, like, you are these things now. You know, you're an international artist. You're a famous painter. You know,
I'm not famous, but
but you are these things, and it's hard for you to like own it. Own it, bro.
what?
Own it.
Yeah,
It's tough. It's tough. I know. I personally went through a lot of that myself, and it's still hard.
you're a
But
famous
anyway,
podcaster, so I get
it's
recognized.
It's
so
something
much.
that you continue to like work on yourself, and is there a website or
My name,
Instagram? Okay,
my full name.com.
Alfonso Gonzalez Jr.com.
And same with Instagram _. Yeah.
All right.
Alfonso, yeah.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to shout out?
Yeah, not really. Shout out all the homies. Free the homies. Yeah, no, just I really, like I said, I really appreciate you and everything that you're doing. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
Appreciate it. And I know that it's hard for you to like come to a podcast and talk, so I appreciate you like braving the rain and making it out here and
Of course.
and showing up.
Yeah.
So there's a question that we ask at the end of each podcast, and I don't explain the question anymore, but the challenge is to try to answer in one sentence. And Alfonso Gonzalez Jr., how do you do it?
Hard work and persistence.
Hard work and persistence. That's all you need. Thank you, bro. We'll see you guys next week.